Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross podcast. My name is Alyssa Gallobe and I'm here with my co-host Scott Hayward.
Hey, Alyssa, how's it going?
Pretty good. You're back in your hostage situation. Are you safe?
Yes, I am safe. I am blinking multiple times so that people know that I'm safe here,
It's
down in
good.
the dungeon in my parents' basement. But no, we've been having a great time here in Manitoba. Got some more sun. Don't know if that can be seen or not. But why don't we start with you? What were you up to this past weekend?
Well, my weekend was pretty good. We went to the beach in Alberta, which I know people probably don't think that beaches exist in a
Yeah, I
landlocked
was gonna say you
province.
have those.
But being from Ontario, we really miss the beach. My sister lives with us, who is also obviously from Ontario, and there's a couple beaches within driving distance. One is Sylvan Lake, which we're hoping to get to, but this past weekend we went to Chestermere Lake, which is about a 30-minute drive from our house, and I quite enjoyed it. The water was really great. They have these rock stepping stones, so you don't just go in the water and then fall all the way down. Good for kids. My 1.5-year-old was running along these little stairs, which was really great for her. The bathrooms are close. They have change tables. They have a shower on the side of the bathroom, so anyone with kids can relate that something like that is necessary and helpful when you do an outing for the day. So all in all, it was really good, and we too got some sun. My husband always makes fun of me because of how white I am, but his farmer's tan is no joke, so we go back and forth about that. Yeah, that was basically the highlight. We went to Angel's Diner after church on Sunday. It's infamous here in Calgary for its milkshakes, and I got a salted caramel one, and it was pretty good. So those are the basic highlights.
Did it bring all the boys to the yard?
Just one, my husband.
When we meet up with you next week, Aaron and I can compare farmers' tans to one another. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
His farmer's tan is his legs and his feet because he wears he wears shorts to shovel snow, so he's constantly in
right.
shorts. And he's also in running shoes and sneakers. He does not do any barefoot flip-flop type action. So it's a very, very funny, hilarious contrast.
Eventually, Aaron will get to the point to the dad level. He'll keep leveling up as time
Oh
goes on,
yeah.
and he'll get to the dad level where it's going to be socks and sandals. So
Oh,
just
please
yeah,
no.
just get ready for that. I thought you were going to talk about your newly painted
Oh
shed in the
yeah.
back.
That wasn't
Yeah,
during the weekend, but yeah, I we painted. Well, my sister helped, but we painted our shed. It was kind of chipped paint, a red trim with just bare wood, and so we painted it white trim and this really good royal navy blue color, and we put a little flower
it's the Maple
box on
Leafs,
the.
right?
Exactly.
You
I
painted
didn't
over
even think of
the
that.
Flames red to Toronto Maple Leafs blue.
Why did I not even think of that? I'm totally rubbing that in my husband's face after it. And it's gonna put salt in the wound given the trades for that the Flames have made. Although he is happy about
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought they did pretty good with that trade.
Yeah.
Tudor for Matthew Tkachuk
Kachuk.
was
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good trade. So
But we just bought our newborn son a Goudreau jersey, so that was a bummer.
perfect, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So things in
Uh,
Manitoba are going well.
yeah, this past weekend, my old man and I we went out swinging and went to the golf course, and I was pretty happy with my long game. I was really happy with my short game, but it was my middle game that was sucking pretty bad. Wasn't able to connect a whole all that well. Granted, they're not my clubs. And when I was able to connect, I was able to zero in pretty close to the pin on a couple of holes. But yeah, I think we're probably going to go out again this weekend. And on Saturday, one of my best friends who's in Winnipeg came into town. He had a couple of really great big pieces of news. They finally bought a new home. I know they've been looking for him and his wife for the past year and a bit. And she's pregnant with their first. So it's that time in our lives where all of our
Mhm.
friends are starting to have, get married and their babies, and so lots of babies on this trip.
Yeah.
My other best friend, he's the one who hosted us here in Brandon, and he was like, "Well, what can I do that's like a special treat that isn't just hamburgers, but could kind of satisfy everyone and it's easy to serve?" So he decided to do what's called a seafood boil. So he had a giant vat. It's like a 6 gallon pot, and he filled it with all kinds of seafood. So he had, shrimps and mussels, squid. lobster, crab legs, and you throw in some corn, you throw in some onion and some potato, and he really wanted to boil it outside so it wouldn't kind of make his house
Right.
smell like seafood, and you have a bunch of moisture everywhere. So I was in charge of the fire, so I built this great fire, and we
Mm.
did it over an outdoor fire. We had some beers, we had some s'mores later on. My other buddy brought his birthday cake because his birthday was the next day, so that was great. And then the next day on Sunday after mass, two of my other cousins and all of their kids, we went with our daughter to Portage to Splash Island, where it's like this water park with all these water slides,
Hmm.
and we were there for 3 hours, and it was a lot of fun. So
Cool.
action-packed weekend. That's
Yeah.
3 weekends in a row where we have some updates for
Yeah.
our listeners and viewers. So I don't know how much longer we can sustain this momentum realistically, but there we go. Those are some pretty good weekend updates.
That's going to be hard to beat. I'm going to have to start going through my cookbooks because I can't be outdone by him. That's for sure. I'm going to have
Okay,
to go
well,
hunting.
yeah, that's right. Let's see when we come next week what you can cook up for us.
Oh man, challenge accepted.
Yeah, there we go.
Today's podcast was sponsored by Laros Media, so check them out. They do videos and documentaries, all sorts of media work. So please check them out at larosmedia.com. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. Well, there's a lot of news this week, but I think no bigger news than Pope Francis here in Alberta. He arrived on Sunday afternoon, and yeah, there's lots to talk about. There's a lot of different angles to this issue, but for those of you who don't know, he did come for a 6 day trip. He promised last year after it was revealed that 215 alleged unmarked graves were discovered in Kamloops that potentially involved children who went to residential schools. Now that was what they said originally when they found these unmarked graves. But a lot of research and a lot of information has come out since then, which we can definitely talk about. But one of the things that I've noticed since the Pope has come to Alberta, obviously there's been a lot of talk about residential schools and about, making up for what's happened in the past, both in terms of, government reparations as well as the church's involvement in government run residential schools. But people in Canada, especially political pundits and politicians in general, have taken this opportunity to use it to attack the church for other things, most specifically about abortion. And I'm not sure if this is something that you've noticed, Scott, but it's something that I've certainly noticed in a lot of the media covering the papal visit, as well as on Twitter and social media elsewhere.
It's interesting. It's a little bit of a mix, right?
Mhm.
And it's interesting to hear the Holy Father's comments because he obviously took ownership on behalf of the church at that time for engaging in the government program, but he did highlight that this first and foremost was a government program. It wasn't the
Mhm.
church or any of the other Christian denominations out there that had requested that the residential schools occur. It was both conservative and liberal governments for well over a century straight that had decided, okay, we're going to take small little children away from their parents, and sometimes over 1,000 kilometers away, and build these other schools, and we're going to get the church and other Christian denominations to run these institutions,
Mhm.
oftentimes severely underfunded.
Mhm.
There were many stories where children and frankly the people who are running them as well were malnourished because the government wouldn't properly fund to get food there because the schools were built basically in the middle of nowhere. They're not built really close to a town oftentimes, and they also weren't built close to where they should have been built close to, which were the reserves where these children came from.
Mhm.
There were terrible things, you know, diseases and viruses and whatnot that would occur that kind of spread through different communities out on the prairies, most especially during the winter months. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, that didn't affect just indigenous children; it affected all children.
Yeah.
And then in wintertime, and this happened to my own family. Right now, I'm not indigenous, but I come from a mix of my father's side Scottish, my mother's side is Polish. So the Polish family, when they came over, my great grandfather, I have a great aunt and a great uncle. Their first two children died of scarlet fever, and so
Mhm.
that great aunt and great uncle of mine, one died at 6 months, the other died at a year and a half. They're buried at the original homestead up in northern Saskatchewan. Well, a lot of these Indigenous children in these residential schools, these scarlet fevers and whatever else would come through, and they unfortunately wouldn't make it and they would die as well. And the government wouldn't even pay for them to be transported back
Yeah.
to their families to be buried. So, it's been known for decades, if not centuries, that now they're unmarked. They weren't originally unmarked. They were marked with wooden markers because that's all they could afford because the government wouldn't pay for anything. And then, of course, through wear and tear with the weather, especially in Western Canada here, we have a 50-degree swing. We go from -50 wind chill to 50 degrees humidex. And that's always been the case. And if you have wooden grave markers, they're not going to last for that long. So they're rediscovering these graves. It's not as a first-time discovery. They're rediscovering these graves. And really, I think that the government should pay for a lot of those children to be exhumed and then transported back to the reserve to have a proper burial, which is what should always happen. But anyway, long story short, it was interesting to see that the Holy Father did mention that this was a government program and not a church program, not a church instigated program. The church and the Christian communities obviously engaged in it. So it's been interesting to see the coverage. Like some news outlets have kind of said, like the Pope has apologized. That's what was asked in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He came to Canada, and they seem to be generally satisfied by it. Some Indigenous leaders seem to be satisfied by it, and others not. And like you said, Alyssa, others have taken the opportunity to attack the church for a variety of issues, like attacking the church for not having women priests and having a position on abortion or marriage, nothing to do with residential schools. So,
Yeah.
It just kind of takes away any credibility they might have, which was probably none to begin with, that this really isn't about Indigenous children who were taken away from their families and some who never made it home. It's really about a whole other host of other issues, and you're just using the Indigenous residential school issue for your own little pet issues that you have against the church.
And it's also amusing to me that Justin Trudeau is claiming to be a Catholic this entire time. As a Catholic, I'm so disappointed in the church. As a Catholic, this and that, when he doesn't adhere to any of the church's teachings whatsoever and actually attacks them and the people who belong to the church on the majority of occasions. And he's also just wrong in a lot of things that he says. For example, he said that it's good that Pope Francis is coming, which is good. But he did say it's important for the church to finally step up and take a lead on this, when Pope Benedict did apologize for this in 2009 already. He did make it one of his missions to make up and talk about the abuses that happened and the church's part in it, at the bequest of the Canadian bishops. So this has been done before. No specific visit to Canada, but it has been brought up and it definitely has been apologized for. I'm glad that they're taking the next step to actually come to Canada, and I think that hopefully, puts a lot of peace in people's minds. But just by the pure fact that he doesn't even acknowledge the apology, over 10 years ago, shows that he, isn't using this as an opportunity to seek true reconciliation, but another, stick to beat the church with. And then just with regards to like when this originally was brought up, there wasn't a lot of information. Even just that there were a lot of unverified reports, like there were no bodies found, there was no excavation, there was nothing unearthed. It was just a lot of pure speculation until all that research had to be done. And the way that the media portrayed it, and especially politicians and political pundits like Jerry Butts and others, automatically went to genocide. This is a genocide. This is a genocide by the Catholic Church. And because of that, there was such an uproar that, so many churches across Canada were being regularly burned down. And then when they were being burned and attacked, those same people were kind of condoning those attacks. Even MPs like Nikki Ashton, who cheered on the mob and said that there's no pride in genocide. There was the BC Civil Liberties Association, the head of the BC Civil Liberties Association, who said burn it all down when these churches were being burned. So many others. Jerry
Did
Butts
she
said
get
that
fired?
she did get fired. Yeah, she was
Yeah,
canceled over
rightfully
that.
so.
But there wasn't much uproar about the others, especially when Jerry Butt said that it was understandable that these churches are being burned down. Specifically, I find that ironic given that he was so much part of the government establishment and the Liberal Party specifically, to just kind of switch blame over to the church and say that it's completely understandable, especially when all three Indigenous chiefs themselves in the Kamloops area have explicitly stated that they were not mass graves, and because mass graves are a hallmark of genocide, and they acknowledge that this was not genocide. Like you said, it
Yeah.
was oftentimes children who were malnourished, tuberculosis went through the schools, and that kind of thing, and they didn't have the funding, and that's a different conversation. But genocide means intent, like there was intent to specifically kill these people when that wasn't the case. So I mean, even with regards to this current visit, CBC has, like you said, has done segments with people who have called for the church to, change. They need women priests. There was a Indigenous activist named Cindy Blackstock who said that one of the things now after the papal visit, one of the things on the to-do list for the church is to reform Catholic teaching that infringes on women and girls and LGBT and gender diverse persons. Even Catherine McKenna took it as an opportunity to say, like, as someone who was raised Catholic, that she hopes that that there's reformation in the church, and she is glad that the Pope is a forceful advocate for climate and social justice, sort of twisting this issue into her issues. Even Bruce Anderson, who runs Abacus Data, said that he wants the church to do good in the world, but it has done a lot of awful harm and continues to do so. It opposes women's reproductive rights. Same-sex marriage has ignored its financial obligations to Indigenous people that it's harmed. So yeah, it's not just, people aren't sticking to the specific issue. They're not talking about, oftentimes they're not talking about the reconciliation that is hoping that the Pope wants to happen, especially given that he's elderly, he's sick, he's coming all the way to Canada, he was wheeled out in a wheelchair. Like, this is a big trip for him. It's not easy, and yet those same people who wanted him to come and who are calling for him to come, now that he's come, it's not enough for them. They want the church to do all these other things that kind of fit their progressive narrative.
Yeah, it was never about the Indigenous children that died in residential schools for a lot of these people ever, which is just sad because it should be, because that was a terrible issue. And it's very interesting to say that there was cultural genocide when the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, when they were living amongst the Huron in particular in the mid 1600s, they actually got permission from the Apostolic See, from the Vatican, to translate parts of the masses into Huron, into Wendat, which is Indigenous language. They lived amongst the Huron for decades. They learned their language and their culture. They were able to, in a way, baptize a lot of the culture into the church. So it's really sad, because here in Canada, well, North America in general, we really should have kind of like an Indigenous right. We have different rights within the church. So within the Greek Catholic Church, there are 17 different churches, and you have the Ukrainians, the Ruthenians, the Hungarians, the Slovaks. You have the Syro Malabars, are all the way out in India. That was a church that was founded by St. Thomas. You have the Syriac Church, which includes like Chaldeans, for example, who are from northern Iraq and eastern Syria. These people, this is one of the oldest churches in the world. You have the Alexandrian Church amongst the Copts, amongst the who are now modern day Egyptians. In Canada, there really should have been kind of an Indigenous right within the Roman Catholic Church, which is the largest of all the Catholic churches, because they were the ones that came over with a lot of the Europeans at that time, incorporating, because I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the Jesuits did have like deerskin vestments made by Indigenous people with their beads, and the beads do have meaning in terms of the colors and the way it's ordained or ornated out amongst the vestments, incorporating their finest of their sweet grasses in with incense, within the thurible, within the mass, and things like this. So I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but to say that there was cultural genocide imposed specifically by the Catholic Church is so far from the truth. I think that's actually a big reason why the Society of Jesus, why the Jesuits did not take on any residential schools, because it really does go against Catholic teaching. Catholic teaching is that you go to where the people are. And at that point in time, the the government was asking the church to help out to teach, the various subjects that otherwise wouldn't be taught, so they can help be somewhat ingrained into Canadian society, whether it be agriculture, whether it be learning English, certain mathematics and things of this nature. The Jesuits would have gone to the reserves, but the government at the time, both liberal and conservative, didn't want Jesuits or any other Christians to go to reserves and wanted these residential schools. So if you're going to talk about cultural genocide or trying to kill different cultures, it's the government that was trying to do that, not most especially the Catholic Church, but also the other Christian denominations. And of course, there's all these other, like you said, pet issues, like,
Mhm.
Justin Trudeau is a Catholic by virtue of his baptism. We would say that there's an indelible mark upon his soul. There's an ontological change within his soul. Again, getting very specific with the terminology here, but he can never not be Catholic, even if he wants to. But by definition, he is not a practicing Catholic because he is out there promoting abortion. He is pro-abortion. Amongst other things, like, I don't know, I'm not his confessor, but you need to go to confession once a year. You need to receive Holy Communion during Eastertide. Like, I doubt that many of those. You need to tithe to the church, obey the laws of holy matrimony. I don't know if he's doing any of those things, but by virtue of him promoting abortion, he himself is not a practicing Catholic. So whatever he has to say about the Catholic Church, sorry, not really interested in. But it is interesting too. I want to talk about one other thing real quick with this trip, that when the Holy Father has come to Edmonton, and when, at the recording of this, like the papal mass just ended, and yes, there was tens of thousands of Catholics that were there, but it's interesting to me that it was not completely full. Like the upper portions of Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton were empty, and so I think it's indicative of the current pontiff coming to Canada. I am curious if Pope St. John Paul II or Pope Benedict XVI had come to Canada to do this apology, if those seats would have been full. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I thought that was a little bit interesting too. It's just another kind of layer to this story that has many, 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 many layers.
Yeah. I mean, I will answer your question, but I also wanted to just extrapolate onto what I said when I was talking about churches being burned down, because when they were being burned down, what I found interesting as well was it wasn't Indigenous people who were burning down these churches.
No,
It's like it was usually like Antifa, sort of like, oftentimes white people who were doing it on behalf of them. When the chiefs and the people who belong to those communities were saying, "Don't do this. We don't want you to do this. This is not the response."
they were
Um,
oftentimes burning down Indigenous
yeah.
parishes that were on reserve that they still go to today. There's a high percentage of people amongst the Indigenous population in Canada that are Catholic
Hmm.
and frankly are practicing Catholic. Like
Hmm.
they're more Catholic than Justin Trudeau. They obey the teachings of the church, what we call the magisterium. They actually go to mass. They're receiving the Holy Communion during Easter. They're obeying the laws of holy matrimony. They're tithing to the church. They're going to confession at least once a year. They're Indigenous and they have their own parishes. And here are
Hmm.
white people burning down their
Yeah.
own parishes.
And then also when these same sort of political pundits are taking this issue and saying it's mass graves and genocide, when the chiefs themselves are saying these are not mass graves. And also they also talked about how in many of these cemeteries, they were community cemeteries. So they belonged to both to the First Nations, but also the broader Canadian community. And why I'm bringing this up is because when you kind of exaggerate to a certain extent, what happens is doing an injustice to the actual injustice that happened, because then people are focusing on trying to disprove, like we are trying to kind of get to the nuts and bolts of what actually happened, instead of actually talking about, these were injustices. They need to there needs to be healing. We need to apologize. This can never happen again. But when you're exaggerating so much that it's a genocide and that these are mass unmarked graves, and there was all this other noise, it's taking away from what the injustice that actually happened. And so I think in these specific situations we need to listen to the indigenous chiefs who are actually focusing in on the issue and talking about it correctly, and they're not the ones that are causing violence or destruction. So it would do well for these political pundits and politicians and stuff not to stoke the fire but to actually follow their example.
Yeah, and frankly, to follow the example of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of sought out healing and the uncovering of the truths and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stories for people who went to residential schools and their experiences,
Mm-hmm.
both good and bad. The vast majority seem to be, not great.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that should be focused on during this trip, before and after as well. But of course, like a lot of other issues in Canada, is being hijacked by leftists for their
Mm-hmm.
own particular pet projects, which is another injustice on top of the injustice that already occurred, all those decades ago.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll be right back.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. Now, the second big news story of this week has to do with the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. It was revealed this past week that Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, endorsed Pierre Poilievre. Now, this doesn't super shock us because we did know that it was sort of a long time coming. We knew that Andrew Scheer was going to endorse him, that it was probable Stephen Harper was going to endorse him. But of course, all the Poilievre people, even John Charest, came out with a statement with regards to this endorsement. It made national headlines. So different people have different perspectives on this. I mean, Harper didn't endorse anyone in the 2017 or 2020 leadership races. Poilievre was a cabinet minister in the Harper government, so they do know each other and probably fairly well. And then, Harper did zone in on the fact that he is strong on the economic issues. He basically just focused on that, which is what we've been talking about, that he is strong on the economic issues, but there are so many other issues that face Canada. Now, some people are saying, this is a hallmark of unity. Pierre has gotten Scheer's endorsement. Now he gets Harper's endorsement. He's uniting the party, with these people. And then other people are saying, well, it's former leader Andrew Scheer and Prime Minister Stephen Harper are part of the party establishment. This is an establishment endorsement for an establishment candidate. And then other people are saying, why is he coming out so late in the game with this endorsement? Is it a sign of trouble? What's the reasoning behind that? So, Scott, what is your opinion on this endorsement, and where do you fall in terms of these three different camps?
So it's definitely an establishment endorsement of an establishment candidate, which is all well and fine. But to think that Pierre Poilievre is not an establishment candidate and is a maverick outsider is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy has spent his entire adult career, if you want to call it that, in elected politics. He was elected in his early 20s. He didn't have a position before that. He didn't start a business. He didn't work at a different business. He worked as a staffer. I don't know if he has a professional designation or not. Not that that super matters anyway. He's elected by the people of Carleton, and that's good enough for me. But to say that he's, an outsider, he's going to take the party by storm. He is the party. Mm-hmm. He's been an elected member of parliament for the party for almost 20 years. He was a junior minister in the Harper government. He late in the Harper government, mind you, but he definitely started in a junior profile. It was interesting because I listened to Harper's endorsement of Poliver. He said he was a strong minister. Again, that's kind of BS, because if he was a strong minister, why wasn't he in your cabinet in 2006 or in 2008 or right after when you got elected in 2011 in a fairly prominent role? When Pierre Poliver was a minister toward the end of the Harper government, which ended in 2015, he got in trouble because he was issuing checks on behalf of the federal crown, which ministers and members of parliament can do. But it had a big, giant conservative logo on it, which like any junior staffer would tell you was a no-no, but he went ahead and did it. So strong minister, I think that's a little far-fetched. He said he is a strong and effective critic of the Trudeau Liberals. That might be the case, but only on very specific issues. You know, he doesn't. There was no critique of the Trudeau Liberals on Bill C-16, which was the bill that made Professor Jordan Peterson famous for his opposition to it when it included sexual orientation putting into the federal human rights code in Canada. There was no opposition to the Liberals inserting into their election platform in 2021, saying that they're going to defund crisis pregnancy centers. There's no opposition to the Liberals on Bill C4 and C6, the conversion therapy bills, which of course have a bunch of issues with them, particularly parental rights. So he only wants to critique the Liberals when they want to critique them. Also, like, I think the Conservative Party needs to get beyond just critiquing Justin Trudeau and actually put forward its own program of like what they would actually do if they were in government. Like you said, Alyssa, he mentioned economic issues. I mean, that's Harper's bread and butter. That's all he wants to focus on. But what I thought was really interesting is that he said that Pierre Poliver wants to fix institutions. And I've never really heard that from his campaign thus far. Like, he just wants to really burn down institutions, wants to fire the governor of the Bank of Canada, which is something that a prime minister or cabinet really can't do until the end of that contract. Doesn't really mention saying like, oh, we want to take a look at the contract that we have with the Bank of Canada, the board of the Bank of Canada, see how they calculate inflation, see what we can do. There's been no talk of that from the Poliver campaign. It's been more or less, we're going to burn it to the ground. So when he says, needing to fix institutions doesn't really make any sense. One other thing is the timing is interesting, is it not, Alyssa? Because we did hear about this back in February. Like, it was kind of, we were expecting this for months. And when the membership sales numbers came out at the beginning of June, and the Poliver people said they sold 300,000, which is probably around that. Now that we know the full number and everything, I thought, okay, well, Harper's not going to kind of take away his aura of being a former prime minister for almost a decade to be engaged in a leadership race where more or less mathematically at least looks like it's over. So it makes me wonder, like, are the Poliver people seeing something in the numbers that they're maybe not happy with? Like, I've spoken to numerous people on different campaigns that say that, yeah, like, there's a lot of people that want to vote for Pierre amongst the 675,000 members that are starting to ID. That doesn't really make sense to me. The only thing I can really think of is maybe they're having a really difficult time getting out the vote, because now members of the party, I don't know if you've received it. I know I received my ballot. My parents, my sisters, they've received their ballots. People are starting to receive their ballots. So are the Poliver people having an issue with getting out the vote, with getting those ballots mailed in? Maybe that's to help them out. Because if your story for the past 6 months from the Poliver camp, which has been the case that, oh, we've outsold everyone, this thing is over, it might kind of demotivate people in the middle of July and August to come back and like fill it out, copy their ID, their driver's license, or whatever, and send it to the auditors for the party. So one news story that came out this past week related to the Conservative Party leadership race in terms of numbers was the pollster Angus Reid has some new numbers on what Canadians in general and Conservatives think of what they think are the two front runners. I don't think they're the two front runners, but between Pierre Poliver and John Charest. And so quickly just wanted to go through some of those numbers because they are a little bit eye-opening. And Angus Reid is known to have one of the best pulses amongst the Conservative donor and voter base. Yeah. So all along, they were the ones before Abacus and fair enough to add because they eventually picked this up too. But it was Angus Reid that first picked up that, Conservatives weren't that big of a fan of Aaron O'Toole, especially Aaron O'Toole 3.0, whatever version that was, starting in January of 2021. So they kind of put the numbers between them, between Jean Charest and Pierre Poilievre. So I'm quickly going to go through them if that's all right. They said, amongst those who voted in 2021, who voted for Conservatives, if Jean Charest were the leader, only 72% of Conservatives who voted in 2021 would vote Conservative if Charest were the leader. That number is 85% for Pierre. So that's a fairly significant difference there. But check this out. Amongst PPC, 12% would vote PPC who voted last time for PPC. If Charest were the leader, only 1% would do so. If Pierre Poilievre were the leader. LPC, so that's Liberal Party of Canada, 17% of them would vote for the Conservatives if Charest were leader, only 2% for Poilievre. For the NDP, 10% of them would vote for the Conservatives if Charest were leader, 3% for Poilievre. And for the Bloc, 14% would vote for Conservatives if Charest as the leader, 10% if it were Poilievre. When it comes to the regions, this is the most interesting thing. So when it comes to the regions, 35% each in BC, whether it's Charest or Poilievre leading the party, 45% for Charest in Alberta, 62% for Poilievre in Alberta, 41% in Manitoba, Saskatchewan for Charest, 52% for Poilievre in that region. In Ontario, it's pretty close, 33% for Charest, 30% for Poilievre, 26% for Charest in Quebec, 20% for Poilievre, 43% for Charest in Quebec, 33% for Poilievre. So what does this mean? I took all those numbers from the Angus Reid Institute for that poll. I plugged them into 338 Canada's kind of federal simulator where you can play around the numbers and it'll spit out what the seat numbers will be. Well, if you took those numbers for Pierre Poilievre, it'd be 155 seats for the Conservatives, 99 for the Liberals, 48 for the NDP, 34 for the Bloc, and 2 for the Green. So it's a strong minority by a minority Conservative government nonetheless for Poilievre. For Jean Charest, if you took those numbers, it's 185 seats for the Conservatives, 80 for the Liberals, 40 for the NDP, 31 for the Bloc, and 2 for the Green. So it's a fairly strong Conservative majority. So basically what is happening is if Charest were the leader, what it shows is that he can actually pick up a lot of, and there's not a lot of them, to be frank, but there are some of them, liberal conservative swing voters in the right regions. But if Poilievre were the leader, he's bringing back all those PPC people home. So I'm wondering if a mix of, weak get out the vote effort on Poilievre's people's part, maybe they're picking up that Charest actually is a little more popular than they initially thought amongst the Conservatives. And this poll that shows that Charest would actually get 30 more seats than Poilievre. Maybe they're concerned, and maybe that's the reason for the timing. I don't know. That's a lot to be had right there. I wanted to delve into the numbers a little bit. I'm sorry, that's just kind of my little forte, and that's what I like to do. But what are your thoughts, Alyssa, on that? Why do you think this is all happening right now from the Poilievre camp? The timing does seem odd.
Well, I mean, it's funny because although I'm no fan of Poilievre, I really am no fan of Charest. So those polling numbers are the best to hear. It's funny too because I don't see him as a threat, Charest. Like in the last leadership race, I thought it was going to be very close. I really didn't know who was going to win between O'Toole and McKay. There was really strong supporters on either side. They both had a lot of airtime and media time, and people that I saw on social media, people that I knew in campaigns, were equally divided amongst the two camps. But this, I just don't see that with the Charest and Poilievre campaign. And I don't know if it's just because I'm tapped in more towards Poilievre type people, more towards the right of the party and not at all towards the center or the left of the party, I guess you could say. But so those numbers are very surprising. I think, especially given that, you mentioned before, we've talked about this before, that I don't even see him coming in second place. But it'll be interesting to see. That being said, if it was up to me, I would much prefer a Conservative party that brought back the PPC than a Conservative party that won over Liberal voters.
Yeah, and then what did you think of Harper's endorsement, though?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was weak sauce. I thought his hair looked super weird. That's something that I noticed right away. It went from like Lego Man to like Trudeau's haircut, just longer. Not that that makes a huge difference. Just thought I would throw that out there. But I also thought that the content wise, it was just very weak. He, like you said, he solely focused on economic issues. I didn't know that part about his cabinet minister positions and lack thereof, and then sort of the controversy that happened. So that's interesting. I don't know. I just thought he was in the cabinet. They must be friends. They probably got that endorsement early. I don't know why it would have the timing. My only thought would be that, like you said, it was because of the numbers aren't coming up for them. They're falling short. They think they need that extra boost. Um, but when I saw Stephen Harper's endorsement, it's not like I said, "Oh wow, this is huge." He's definitely going to win now. This is going to put him over the top. I just thought, yeah, just another establishment has been. I also thought it was really funny how, both Scheer and Harper are both lost to Trudeau, and they're telling us how to beat Trudeau. Like, I don't think you actually know. So maybe stay away from that talking point and just stick to why you're endorsing him. But anyway, it doesn't do much for me. I don't think it's huge, but apparently, other people think differently. But it doesn't change anything for me as a conservative
These
voter.
numbers would suggest why, to me, Charest is wanting a third debate so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally.
It,
And I totally understand the
yeah.
Poilievre's point of not engaging because they do want to take away more of his supporters. That totally makes sense to me. But I still think he should be involved in the debate, because if he's as strong of a speaker and he's a fighter, then why is he running away from a debate? If he's scared of Charest, just beat him in the debate. Like, I don't see the big deal. It kind of shows weakness on Poilievre's part. But I do understand, like you said, why Charest would want to debate for sure.
Yeah, it does kind of take away from the whole mantra or this idea that they've been trying to build about Pierre Poilievre, is that he's going to stand for your values, and he's just not afraid of the media. Doesn't talk to the media. He's not afraid to take on Trudeau. He's not afraid to take on his opponents. Doesn't want to have a debate. He's not afraid to talk about the issues. Only talks about like 3 different issues.
Yeah.
Throughout the campaign, it just kind of seems to me that he doesn't live up to the hype that they've kind of built about him.
Yeah.
And so this latest kind of debate debacle, if you want to call it that, makes sense. To me, it doesn't make sense as a party would have a debate this late, when probably well over 80% of the ballots have already been sent out, and they already started receiving ballots, and they've already started opening up
It's very
a
odd.
front ballot to validate that the ballot can actually be counted in this riding. So. If they wanted to do the debate right after Dominion Day, right after Canada Day, beginning of July, that would make sense to me to do the third debate at that point, before the ballots would be issued mostly. But to do it at the beginning of August, when most people have already voted, it doesn't really make sense to me. So I get more of Dr. Lewis's points than I do with Pierre Poilievre's points, because Poilievre's statement just took a swipe at Charest again. Like, I don't really understand the reason for punching down. Like, politically, I just don't quite understand it. I don't know if they were scared because Maxime Bernier was supposed to win in 2017 and didn't. And, Peter MacKay was supposed to win in 2020 and didn't. I don't know if that has him spooked or what the deal is. But, the timing of the Harper endorsement, the punching down that constantly happens with the statement of not participating in the debate. It's going to be interesting to see how he runs the party should he win the leadership race. So, yeah, it was another interesting week in the conservative leadership race, no doubt about that. So, we'll have to keep an eye on that going forward.
Well, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about things we like and things we hate.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. And our final segment will be things we like and things we hate.
Things we like and things we hate.
So why don't you go ahead, Scott, start us off with the thing that you like this week.
Thing I like. So the thing I like this week is, I'm going back to it, which I usually do, is that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are now 7-0, which is the first time that's happened for me since 1960.
Actually, my husband and I keep talking that because you and your wife are coming to visit us and you'll land on Tuesday, but there's a Blue Bombers Stampeders game on Saturday here in Calgary, which is a bummer because that would have been fun to go to.
And then, I just missed the one that happened in Winnipeg on that Friday because I came in on the Saturday, on the 16th, and it happened on the 15th. And I thought about, am I selfish and do we just fly in on the Friday and my wife can just wait for 4 hours while I go to the Bomber game? It was pretty much sold out, so I don't know if I would have got a great seat anyway, but that was a hell of a game. It came down to one of the final plays where I think it was Jamal Jordan couldn't bring in. It's such a beautiful throw from Bo Levi Mitchell, and it popped off of his chest plate as he hit the ground. And then Mario Houston, just inches from the ground, picked it up, the interception, and Winnipeg was able to seal the deal with a 26-19 win. So it will be interesting because when Winnipeg goes to Calgary on this Saturday, which I have my cousin's wedding, so I can't watch it, but I'm sure I'll be checking on the updates. Winnipeg is the only team in the CFL right now to have not had a bye week yet. I think they have something like 12 of their 24 starters, like half their starters or something like that. Maybe not quite 12, but it's definitely pushing double digits of their starters are injured, which is really high for a football team. A lot of them being, receivers, key linebackers, safeties, guys like that. So it will be a very kind of rough and tumble, injured, plagued, no rest Winnipeg Blue Bomber team coming into Calgary. Calgary played really well against the Bombers. They're coming off a bye. They haven't played for 2 weeks. So
they're going to win.
It's all advantage for Calgary. It's all advantage for Calgary. But I mean, a lot of people have written off the Blue Bombers a couple of times already this season. Once against BC, where they won that 44-23. And then a lot of people were picking Calgary last time when they were in town against the Blue Bombers. So I don't know what the betting odds have, but I may put some money down. I can make a little bit. They haven't been pretty games, but hey, defenses win championships, special teams win championships, and they're 7-0, and they're the only undefeated team in the league. So that's something I like.
I'm just nodding along, acting like I know what you're talking about. I'm like, yes, special teams.
How about you? What's something you like?
Okay, well, something that I like this week is a book that I ordered on Amazon, a bestseller, Canadian bestseller. I haven't read it yet, but I already know that I'll like it, but I will give you a review after I read it. But it is Andrew Lawton's book on the Freedom Convoy.
Good.
Very excited about that.
Talk about it, eh?
Pardon me?
Hopefully we can get him to come on to talk about it.
Yeah, that would be great. But it's the inside story of 3 weeks that shook the world. He was on Justin Ling's podcast last week, and I want to listen to that this week as well, because they have very different views on the Freedom Convoy, and I love conversations like that. But yeah, I'm excited to read it. My mom and brother were down like almost every weekend when the Freedom Convoy was happening. So when Liberals were calling the convoy protesters rapists, I took that personally. But yeah, I think it's going to be great. I know he worked really hard on it. He's a very honest, objective journalist, so I'm excited to read it, and I already know it'll be something that I like.
He was giving me updates about it a little bit as he was writing it, and I would ask him a little bit about it, and I was thinking like, oh, okay, he's going to publish this like in a year or two, because it's a lot of work, a lot of interviews, all that type of stuff, and he must have just worked his ass off, because he got that book right to the press real quick. So good on Andrew. Yeah, we should definitely have him on to talk about that. I mean, we're having 2 leadership races because of it. right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
In
Yeah.
conservative land. So
Yeah.
it'd be good to have him on.
Yeah.
Things I hate. What I hate, I alluded to it already in this podcast, is my middle game for my golf game. Like my dad has such a nice 3-wood, and I was using it, and it works so well for me out there on the fairway. I think my drives were beautiful. I was using my uncle's TaylorMade. I love TaylorMade drivers. I was able to get a nice controlled fade onto it. I was smacking it, oftentimes dead center down the fairway. I don't think I was off the fairway once with that driver all day. My short game, 100 yards in, 125 yards in with those wedges. Those are fast greens at Shiloh too, and I was sticking it pretty close. But that middle game, I hated. I don't like it. I need to work on it. I don't golf enough. I'm working too hard, Alyssa. I need more time off. Uh, that's not true. I do work hard. I don't need more time off, but I love golf, and it's just one of those things where that part of the game is going to come together unless I go out for 20 to 50 times a year, which isn't going to happen for a
I know
number.
your wife would love that. Yeah.
We were
The
supposed to go golfing last night, and we got rained out. We
She
went drinking.
golfs?
She came to the driving range with us
Yeah.
about a month ago with our friend couple in Hamilton, and we took our baby because it's just a driving range, and so our baby would just watch me, hit, and then whenever my wife would get up and hit the ball, which it's kind of rough the first time, but she did pretty good for first time. Our baby would just laugh at her all the time. So no, she was excited to get out for the first time. So maybe we can do that before we hit Calgary, but. Yeah, we were supposed to go. We got rained out. We went for tacos and margaritas instead. But it's a pretty good
Lovely.
consolation prize. Yeah.
I will tell you about the one and only time I ever golfed. It was when I was working at a restaurant as a waitress, and the staff was going out golfing, and we were put in teams because I had never golfed before. I think it was like best ball or whatever.
Yep.
And I was on a team with two lesbians who smoked pot the entire time, and it was the most amazing experience ever. They were really good at golf, and they were really funny because they were basically high the whole time. So that was my golfing experience. I feel like I learned a little bit, but it was amusing to say the least.
Well, listen, if we ever go out, you and I, we can try to recreate that experience.
Perfect. The only thing I know less about than football, well, I know a little bit about football, but is golf. So again, fairway, fair weather, whatever you're talking about. Potato wedges, I don't know. Okay, so the thing that I hate this week is woke library books. For all the moms out there, if you take your kids to the library, this is kind of what I do now while my daughter is playing. I have her, she's running around with all the other little kids. There's blocks and coloring crayons and stuff there. And I have my baby in my carrier, and I just go around to all the different shelves that are aimed specifically for toddlers and children and look at all the books there that are trying to push a certain agenda. And it could be anything. I even made a video on my Instagram of it. But the very first one that actually caught my eye was about how to take care of the world. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I was flipping through, and most of them were fine. But then I got to the middle, and it said something about we care for the world by eating less meat. And I was like, this seems to be particularly relevant given what people are talking about in terms of eating bugs and slugs and everything, and talking about the protein that these insects have for us. So I thought that was interesting. There of course are tons and tons of books about same-sex couples and my mommy's marrying my mommy and that kind of thing. But it's weird in these books, because in that particular book that I referenced about mom marrying mom, it said it was asking these different questions, and one of the questions was, will grandma and grandpa be there? And then it just left it at that. Like, I don't know if the author had some issue with their parents, but it was just kind of strange in that regard. And the thing that I take the thing that I have the most problem with, especially in these types of books, is when they talk specifically about like the drag and trans issue, because I mean, like we've talked about before, that totally confuses children. It's aimed at children. They don't know what that is. it's very confusing, and I really dislike that. There was also another book that I saw last time I was there, which was yesterday, about different bodies, and like every body is beautiful. And although that is the case, and I obviously want to be body positive and want my children to have a very healthy view of their body, that's exactly what I want it to be is healthy. So I want them to understand like nutrition and exercise and that kind of thing. And I think, without getting it too much into this topic, but there's a sense that if you are unhealthy, that's still beautiful, and that actually creates a lot of health problems. There are health problems in my family because of obesity, and I don't necessarily want that to be a positive thing that's you know shown to my children. So it's just these are all very like obviously complex issues that parents should be talking about with their kids, and it can't be specifically written about in a 5-page book targeted towards toddlers. That's all, and that's the thing that I hate.
Well, I'll tell you, whenever I come home here for Christmas, I usually put on over the course of 2.5 to 3 weeks about 20 pounds. I usually go up to like a solid 190, 195.
Yeah.
Probably 3/4 of that is drinking about 2 to 5 liters of eggnog mixed with rum. And then at the end of it, before I get on the plane after New Year's, my dad will always poke me in the belly and say, "Well, you got some work to do when you get home."
Yeah.
So I don't know if you read that book or not, but
Well, I just want it all to be about health. Like health is the main issue. It's not about how you look. I don't ever want it to be about that, but I do want my children to be healthy and value exercise and that kind of thing. So, whatever that means. But
it's
the way
really
that
bad that public libraries are quickly becoming more and more trash.
yeah.
Because we're going to eventually have to just build our own libraries, So
Yeah.
you can be the curator of the library that I will make, Melissa.
Well, I mean, like the tower that these toddler books are on, there's only probably like maybe 60 or 70 books, and these sort of like woke books comprise a good chunk of those books. So instead of like talking about colors or counting or what animals or whatever, it's these types of books, which is quite unfortunate. So I don't think I'll ever enroll my children in any library program because of it, but I certainly like it for other ways
Whatever
if I'm
happened
there.
to like Berenstain Bears and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Troopers and like all those? Like I like those as a kid, or like the Hardy
Yeah.
Boys a little bit older.
Hmm. Yeah,
Anyway, but
I
we
know.
can't get too much onto the things that we hate because we'll be
Yeah.
here all day. As you can tell, Alyssa and I are very hateful people, and it's a very, very long list.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate again you taking your time out of your vacation
Oh,
to do
sorry.
this
One
podcast.
thing I have show and tell. I have to
Okay.
tell this story real quick. Producer Dave's telling us we're already at 50 minutes. It's supposed to be a short one, but whatever. So, for my birthday was a couple of weeks ago. It was the day after we got here. My aunt and uncle came over with my cousin, who's also my godson. We had a family friend come over. We just had a barbecue, a few drinks, pretty simple. That's typical Hayward summer thing that we do basically every night. And my mother's so sneaky. My mother brought up this issue. It's been a burning issue in my marriage because my wife and I cannot find this cheese grater from IKEA that my parents have had for like 20 years. And I don't know about you, but like the regular cheese grater that has like the 4 sides, and then you have to keep it like on a bowl or on a plate, and like it
Yeah.
moves. And if you're working with like a harder cheese like Parmesan, then like you're like grating your knuckles and you're bleeding everywhere and it's gross. This type of grater has like a little bowl. It has, different types of graters you can put on top. It has like a lid you can put on top. It sits. It's so simple to use. It's what I've grown up with. And you can't
Yeah.
find it. Every time on IKEA, we go to like 2 different IKEAs. It's never in stock. It's not in stock online. And it's not just us that are finding this issue, finding this grater. It's everyone. So she brought this up. And then I go on this tirade like I just now, except longer. And
Oh
then later
man.
in the evening, they're giving me gifts. And they're just little gifts like, a box of beer or whatever. And my aunt and uncle, they found it at a garage sale like 6 months
That's
ago. And
hilarious.
they gave it to my mom to give. And so she said, "Oh, you should come over and give it yourselves." And it has the lid and look at this.
Yeah, I
It
have
just
that
goes,
one.
see, like you know what I'm talking about.
I think most people that I know have it. I
It's
can't believe
so
you can't
difficult to
find it.
find. It's so difficult to find, and now we have it, and we're gonna have a much happier household now for all of us. So I just wanted
Wow.
to let everyone know that I had a great birthday.
You had a great birthday. Mom and dad jokes coming at you. Okay, well, I'm so happy that you got your grader. I'm so excited to see you guys next time you join us for next week's podcast. Scott and I will be physically together, like Joe Rogan style, talking about the issues. And I hope you have a good rest of your vacation. And we'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.